Good evening and welcome back to another new edition of Windows and Current Affairs. And today, again, we embark on a very important topic, or one of the priorities for the vision of 2030, and amongst the 17 goals of sustainable development, or on top of them rather, as one of the priorities, which is empowering and enforcing youth, and in particular transforming new generations into young entrepreneurs. We're going to be talking about how the government is spending efforts, or is taking its utmost efforts and focusing according to the directives of the head of state, His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, finding means and ways to empower and enforce youth on many ways. We're going also to talk about the vision of 2030 and how far have we reached as we are approaching 2023. We're very delighted to be having with us here live in the studio our dear guest, Engineer Mohamed Azzam, board member, International Association Management of Technology. Good evening, Dr. Azzam. How are you doing?
Good evening to you and to your distinguished viewers, and it's always a pleasure being with you here.
Let us first assess how far have we reached ever since almost 7 or 8 years, and ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi have set his feet into office, and he has been giving priorities to special sectors in society, like women on the first place, like youth, like people, ashab al-himam, or people with powers, also the people, the low-income brackets, and you have seen the many and diversified projects to empower also and enforce and sustain the low-income brackets. Let's focus over the efforts that has been exerted ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi entered office and until this very moment, to start with.
Thank you for your question. Actually, Egypt, when introduced Egypt 2030 vision, it's a very ambitious strategy to help Egypt, to help the country to become one of the top competitive nations all over the world. And to be competitive, it needs a lot of efforts, a lot of directions on all aspects. However, if we're going to summarize the whole concept of being competitive or to have a sustainable economic development, you need a trade system and you need technology system, and you link the technology system with the trade system and empowered these two systems by public policies. That's why we can see a lot of efforts are taking place in different economic and commercial sectors. This including having an ecosystem for startups, having an ecosystem for small and medium enterprises. And definitely part of that ecosystems, or in the heart of these ecosystems, are youth and women and people with disability, because we cannot leave anyone behind. And if you would love, or do you think it's very important to have a sort of social empowerment, this should be coupled always with economic empowerment. That's why we're now witnessing a new law for small and medium enterprises with a lot of taxation and tax incentives and non-tax incentives as well. So if you are an early startup or one of the small or micro enterprises working in specific domains, and you'll be able to create wealth, and you'll be able to create jobs for youth and women and people with disabilities, you would have the opportunity to get a lot of financial and non-financial incentives. That include having discounted rates for having your land for building a factory or building a business venture, having very special treatment when it comes to the tax, to the income tax system, having the ability to have a sort of financial access and fund access through very special programs at very discounted rates. For example, having technical support when it comes to the core business, or when it comes to the how to run a small business, and would be able to be connected with the other key stakeholders within the business ecosystem. So there is always now a platform that you can have your own business, because actually having a small and medium, or having a competitive small and medium enterprise, is the fundamental of any development in any economy. Actually, small and medium enterprises represents like 90% of the whole enterprises worldwide, and they are representing like 40% of the global GDP and 50% of the employment. So they are very critical element within any economic ecosystem here in Egypt or all over the world. That's why the country or the Egyptian government is paying more attention to this economic sector, because it's actually is the main driver for employment and the main driver for having a sustainable economic growth. And of course, this is the venue for having more room for empowering youth, women, and people with disability, both on the economic and social levels.
Right. And also, we need to know, before we get into detail about how to empower and enforce this particular, field for investment and as an developing with the economy in general, let's talk about the successful experiences. You said this SMEs and the macro economics are the base and foundation for any successful economic program. And we can take China as an example. There are other countries, or there is Malaysia, there are other countries that have started their economies, the foundation of their economies, on the small and medium enterprise until this very moment. So which of these countries do you think could be a successful experience that could be, that we can borrow and make the best benefit of it?
Each country has its own model for sure. And of course, the development, the economic and social development in a country, in one of actually the second largest economy of the world now is China, with something like more than 17 trillion US dollar GDP, is totally based on, or to the great extent based on SMEs. But however, these SMEs are always linked with other players within what's called a cluster. So it's very important, if you need to have a competitive nation, that you need to have competitive clusters within the nation. The clusters always not having only the key players, but also the small players, the small and micro enterprises who are acting as the main feeders for the large enterprises. So if you need to have a real competitive economy, you need to build what's called traded clusters. Of course, this is what's called local clusters. For example, a local cluster that you are serving a specific area domestically. So pharmacy is within a local cluster. A grocery shop is within the local cluster. But having a small factory for producing specific product or services, and linking them to the larger player within the same industry, because always the market is very competitive, and being having these kind of small enterprises within a cluster, that would help them to grow collectively. It would help them to increase their productivity. It would help them even to export their products and services within the region or on international level, because the size matters and the quality matters. So the only way to overcome this obstacle for having efficient and effective SMEs is to include them within larger clusters. And each cluster has its own competitive edge, and you need to help this kind of SMEs within this kind of clusters to improve their ability to use technology to improve or to enhance their competitive edge over the competition. So there is always technology out there. Technology is starting from having SMEs that having a sort of automation for their back office, for their inventory control, for managing their sales, managing their payables, managing their receivables. Otherwise, they will not be able to
Exactly, it's
see
a
the
must.
deficiency, where the deficiency and where there are the areas of improvement. However, it's very also important to help them to use what's called the appropriate technology for serving their core business. For example, if they are producing, I would say, handcrafts, or producing packaging materials for larger industries. So they need to be up to date with the latest technologies to serve their core business, to make their products and services more appealing to the external market, to make them up to the international standards, because actually we are living in an open, connected world, and of course the competition is becoming harder, and it will be like this for years to come. And that's why if you need to have a competitive small and medium enterprise, if you need to empower the economy by having competitive small and medium enterprises, you need to help them to understand how to improve their competitiveness. And the only way to do so is to more utilization of technology from the back side or the back end perspective, as well as the technology serving their core business to become more competitive and more or up to the competition according to the standard and the international standards. Otherwise, it would be very hard for them to compete, because you are competing against everyone. And this is what a country like China did actually. Maybe they didn't start it like this at the beginning, like 30 years ago. However, if you look at the economic ecosystem that is totally or to the great extent dependent on a connected small and medium enterprises within clusters, they are consuming the technology to the great extent. That's why they are becoming more competitive, and now they're having a real footprint in the international market. And I think this is what kind of model that should inspire us, because actually you cannot copy models, but you can inspire by other models, by other successful
and
models.
we can add on our side.
This is the key actually to the great success, to the sustainable success, is to be inspired by successful models, and always you need to innovate based on your circumstances that you have within your country or within your region.
Exactly. The reason why I chose China as one of the closer examples is because of the overpopulation. We have something in common with China, which is a densely populated nation, and they made the best use of it. Do you think we can invest on this on one side, and another side also is the government's efforts and the Egyptian administration's efforts to add, like you kindly mentioned, to this successful experience, which is like, for example, training youth and creating the training academy for empowering youth, and also creating programs and different venues for youth to be able to engage with. If you like to elaborate.
Thank you again for this question. Actually, this is the foundation, this is the basic infrastructure that you need to make people more qualified for the future opportunities. And the only way to keep people updated and keep their skills up to the international standards and to the real requirements and demands of the local and regional markets is to give them proper education and proper training. Education always would be the base to start with. However, because the technology also disrupting the job market all the time, so you need always to have a sort of continuous training that is more flexible, that's more adaptable to the requirements of the job market, the requirements to the real industry. Beside the training, you have now venues for financial and non-financial support. The financial support, of course, comes from a seed money or seed investment coming from a lot of governmental agencies, depending on which field you are working in. And of course, now we have what's called angel investment community, which are taking more risks for investment rather than the traditional financing models coming from bank, because banks generally is not the right venue for supporting the startups. Definitely, because there is higher risk, and that's why we are not witnessing here in Egypt many angel investor community and what's called venture capitalist community.
Do they come with interest also?
Sorry?
Do they come with interest? I mean, with funds? There are interests included also?
This is a totally different model. They are working based on equity. So I'm gonna, if you are having a good solid idea, and this idea is serving underserved market, and the possibility of expansion of this market is great, or it has the what's called the room for expansion. So I'm gonna to take the risk and invest with you against equity, against percentage of your company, till this company grow, and till this company is able to expand its operation and deliver its product and service to the market. Then I'll make what's called exit to other investor, larger investor, or to banks, for example, or to larger company that would acquire this kind of small or startup company if they see the value. Banks are totally different, because the finance from banks are coming for more mature, stable businesses. I can have a forecast, I can have a business plan that can be implemented and achieve its goals and objectives, having a feasibility study, because I'm addressing a mature market with specific clear demands. This is not the case for the startups, and Egypt now is becoming one of the main attraction for investment in the area of startups. Actually, last year in 2021, we had the opportunity to attract like 490 million US dollars in this domain, and I would believe by the end of the current year 2022, this number could be almost 1 billion. It would be doubled. And this is the beauty in the area and domain of startups here in Egypt, as well as on many other places on the planet. Actually, even with the consequences of COVID, actually this sector in 2021, the investment in such startup community or startup business sector was like 650 billion US dollars, and this figure was only 350 billion dollars a year earlier. So this is a fast moving, actually it's one of the greatest growing investment domain for many investors, and I think Egypt is very capable to attract more investment in the domain of startups, because we have the brains, and this is economic sector is totally dependent on the quality of ideas and quality of products and service that utilizing technology to a great extent, and the possibility for growth is also unlimited, actually.
Right. We're talking this in the light also of, after COVID, there is the military confrontation between Russia and Ukraine, and there are different events that has been taking place ever since the pandemic have started. So this have affected the world badly, not only Egypt,
Definitely,
but the whole world. So do you think that this would require a different type of economy, or an economic plan, or a reform program that could be working with these circumstances, or we could still keep going the same direction?
Definitely we need a different model. We need to have the concept of resilience, the ability to be resilient, ability to be agile. And of course, the world, since the pandemic outbreak back to March 2020, has changed forever, or at least has changed for the rest of the century. That's why the concept of resilience is becoming a fundamental concept.
Concept of resilience.
Definitely. You wouldn't be able to grow or to be competitive or to have a footprint in the global economic system without having a resilient ecosystem. A resilient ecosystem starts again with the public policy that understand the concept of resilience and applying this concept to every business and social sector. To have a resilient healthcare system, to have a resilient ICT infrastructure, because we are witnessing huge demand for consuming information and communication technology, and we've seen this during the COVID pandemic. And you need to have more investment in infrastructure, logistics hubs. You need to invest more in production facilities like factories, but not the traditional factories. That factories are up to the standards of the fourth industrial revolution. You need to have clusters that, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, having cluster based on small and medium enterprises connected all together, and all of them are considering also the environment. They should be green startups, green micro and small enterprises. We are not in a position to harm the environment more, actually. Then you need to have a trading system that's also capable to predict the demands, because the demands of the consumer is becoming very sophisticated, especially in the era of such conflict in China, the conflict between the U.S. and China on the trade level, and the military conflict or the Ukrainian crisis that's taking place in East Europe. So you need to predict the change, the ability to forecast the demand, the ability to becoming more agile when it comes to the supply chain, to have the best routes, to have the most optimized routes for having the raw materials coming to the production facilities and going back to the market. That's why we need to integrate both physical world and virtual world, because part of the economy now is reliant on the e-commerce platforms. From the business to business side and from the business to the consumer side. This would help also to have more stable trade system. So resilience is change, or the concepts of, or I would say the world crisis like COVID and the Ukraine war forced all policymakers all over the world to reconsider the concept of resilience and from the scratch. And we are the whole world is reshuffling the economic infrastructure to be able to absorb shocks and to deal with shocks and to have swift recovery. Otherwise, the global economy will definitely suffer in a more severe way, for sure. That's why the world was able to recover swiftly after COVID. Almost it took a year to recover. However, when the Ukrainian crisis happened in February 2022, of course, we would need also at least 2 years to recover from this consequences of such. Actually, we are witnessing now a global war, but on the economic level at least.
So exactly. But you have raised a very important point, which is the green economy, the need to comprise with the international measures, because the whole world is becoming a one united entity Once you do not cope with the measures, you're out of the race, and all these requirements. Of course, this would need, again, a reconsideration of laws, harshing of the laws, another vision, which is the 2030 vision, a complete recognition of the challenges of the climate change, and awareness of the means to be able to contain this particular challenge in the near future, and how to be able to work with it while we are trying to develop with our economy. How could we be able to do that safely?
Actually, coming from the challenges that environmental challenges is open to us great opportunities. So we were discussing the COP27 before going on air, and the COP actually exposed a lot of challenges that could be huge opportunities, especially again for small and medium enterprises, because to have sustainable industries, you need to re-engineer most of the industries to become more sensible and more aware of the environmental challenges and the climate change issues. Regarding this topic, or having such industries re-engineered, actually this will open new venues for small and medium enterprises. They would have the opportunity, or would have the opportunity to attract more investment, what's called the green investment, the investment that are or is located for green projects in the area of textile, in the area of renewable energy, in the area of consumer products. Just name it. Just name it. So this is also open an opportunity. This is not only a challenge, actually it's an opportunity that we need to work on it. And we need to think of building or opening or encouraging small and medium enterprises and technology startups and entrepreneurs to dig more in such challenges and to come up with new solutions that could be implemented. And the beauty here is, if you're developing a product or services in such new domains or new dimension of the economy that is green, the market is not only Egypt or the Middle East or Europe. Actually, the market is global. So it's billions and hundreds of billions of dollars market are opened for a good sustainable product and services. And again, technology would be the key and critical foundation to develop such products or services.
Only we know how to orchestrate the whole game, so that we could be able to execute what we are thinking of. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. However, we need another episode to talk about the necessity of to be in full recognition and awareness of how to implement a good plan of green economy and green investment, by the way, also for other foreign investors. Of course, Engineer Mohamed Azzam, board member of International Association of Management of Technology, would like to thank you so much coming over to Windows and Current Affairs, and hope to see you again real soon.
Always pleasure and honor being with you at Nile TV.
Our pleasure. And I guess this would bring us to the end of this edition of the program. Many thanks to all of you. Until we see you again next week, that's a goodbye.